So hi everyone, I'm Karen Rudy. I'm the president of QFA, and we're recording for the moment, excuse me, just the session where we're speaking, not the questions that people ask. Um, excuse me. So our chief negotiator had an urgent matter to attend to today, so he's not able to be present. And so Micheline Waring, our member services officer, is going to speak first to tell us about the bargaining teams, excuse me, about what's gone on in bargaining and why we're asking for a strike vote now. And then I'll ask others on the bargaining team uh, to add in anything they want to add, and then I will speak and discuss, why a strike vote is needed now, and excuse me, position some of the key reasonings for wanting to have a strike vote. And then we'll open the floor to questions. So Micheline, it's all you now.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Micheline Waring. I've been with QUFA for almost 8 years now, and I just as a bit of an introduction about my work at QUFA, this is my third round of bargaining with QUFA, and then the COVID bargaining was sort of on top of that. So I've had a long history of bargaining with QUFA. And I'm just going to run you through today, kind of just for anybody who hasn't maybe been to a session like this, kind of where we are with our packages and sort of where we're gaining traction with the administration and where we're not, and sort of why we are having this meeting and looking for a strike vote from the membership. So just to go back, basically when we're crafting or thinking about proposals and what we're going to be, asking from the university, it kind of starts. What I do is when we get this agreement, I'm going to start sort of a next list almost immediately, and I call it bargaining. It'll be 4.0 in the next round, and it started when I started with QFA, and I actually inherited a list from Elizabeth Hansen, who's now retired, and then I've used that idea of kind of keeping a running list of things that come up in the QFA office as I talk with members, and then we do all kinds of things as we lead up to bargaining when we're looking at setting our mandate. We have town halls with members. We have, surveys that we run. We do page turns with staff. There's all kinds of things that go into, the discussions that come up through JCA. All kinds of things go into feeding into that mandate so that we know exactly, what the members are bringing into the QFA house in all kinds of ways. So all of those things come together to sort of create the things that we end up asking for. So this round, we've kind of broken things up into 5 packages. So package one was what we call the technology and privacy package. That's where all of the AI proposals were. There was an AI task force that did a lot of that work for us. I'm not a technology expert, and so we had folks from QFA who really know a lot more about that than I do, and they came up with some great recommendations for AI, and the bargaining team adopted all of their recommendations and made proposals based on those AI that AI report that we received from the AI task force. Secondly, we did a package called job security, and in that package, it sort of focused on Articles 25, which is appointments, 29, which is where the Q sets are, 30 and 31, which is the RTP and RCAP articles, Article 32, which is about adjunct rights, and 35, which is the sort of I've lost the name of the article now in my head, but that's where we have things around. Let me just look it up. So I'm kind of brain for it here. So Article 35 is maintenance of the scholarly and professional environment. So those kind of all went into the job security package. And then we had our third package was just about workload. We kept workload on its own, which is Article 37. And then we had a package called fairness, and that sort of is a bit of a kitchen sink, and we had a number of smaller proposals kind of throughout the agreement. It's a lot of things that can be administrative. That's where we had collegial governance, like all kinds of fairness things around grievance, equity. All of those proposals, sort of normative proposals, went into that fairness package. And then finally, we had our fifth package, which was compensation and merit. The merit piece was also explored through LOA 6 over the last few years. And then, like a compensation, which is, what would be in any round of bargaining. So, in terms of that, I would say there are some areas where we've had really good discussions and we've gained some traction in this negotiation. So mostly, I would say those have been in the workload area, where we have a tentative agreement around a new workload standard template, which was really needed, a guidelines document, which was really needed, and most of the provisions in Article 37 where we needed some tweaking, some things were not working that we discovered in the last round, in this iteration of the collective agreement. So we've made a lot of progress in workload. The administration came willing to talk about workload, and we didn't get everything we wanted. They didn't get everything we wanted, but we were able to really negotiate, I would say, quite well on the issue of workload. Um, Likewise, we've had sort of pretty fruitful discussions around merit. We don't have a tentative agreement per se, but there's a lot of back and forth around the discussions around merit, which has been good. We've also made reasonable gains, like some gains and other things we've pulled in the fairness package. But again, there's been back and forth. Where we really are struggling and where we think by the end of the last round of conciliation, or the first round of conciliation, that has prompted a lot of this discussion and calling for a strike vote, is in the AI sort of technology privacy package, in the job security package, and in non-merit compensation. So those areas we've been really struggling to engage the university to have meaningful discussion, and so that's where we are today. So just to go back, so we met with the conciliator not last week, but the week before, and part of that process, he really asked us to sort of like really think about what we need to have versus nice to have, and so we've done a lot of that work. I would say in workload, in technology and fairness, we've really like looked at our proposals. We still have some work to do in job security. We were waiting on them to respond to us, and they did so on part of the package and at the very end of conciliation. So that's one where we still need to go back and do a bit of work. But for the most part, I think we've really been very thoughtful about what we've asked for, and also in terms of like starting to pull things so that we're not being unreasonable in terms of not moving the process along. Our hope had been that they would start to kind of meet us in the middle a little, and that did not really happen in conciliation. They sort of took places that we withdrew, package it, or uh, some of our proposals, and didn't really counter a lot on that. So I'm just going to do a very quick walking through, because one of the questions that came up on Friday was sort of like, in terms of like what's still on the table, what kind of proposals are, important to QUFA and we're hanging on to as we go into this next round of conciliation. And I would note that we do have bargaining starting tomorrow, sort of tomorrow. I think we may or may not be meeting, but Wednesday for sure, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then next Monday we're meeting ahead of conciliation, and then conciliation next week. So just starting with the IT package. So some of the things that we've kept, where we consolidated IT, is that initially the IT proposals were kind of all throughout the agreement. And we realized that we weren't going to make traction on that. One of the real battles that we're facing with IT is that really there's very little language in the sector in collective agreements yet. And so nobody really wants to go first or to be the first one to allow that kind of language to go into agreements. And so it's been difficult to engage the administration on those proposals. So what we've done is we've backed out having proposals throughout the agreement and kind of really focusing on Article 23. So, things we're holding on to are things like that technology that passively collects electronic data or metadata that's to be treated as surveillance, that surveillance devices that may ID someone, such as through voice or facial recognition, are to be considered active surveillance and will not be employed by queens or third parties on university-owned devices unless the conditions of Article 23.2.2 are met. Another one that we're really holding on to is something called it's around automated processes and that they will not be used to summarize, evaluate, or rank materials for RTP, for RCAP, for discipline, for grievance, for financial exigency, for appointments, teaching evaluations, performance reviews, merit, academic leave, all those kind of things. So we want people making those decisions, not um, we just think that people should be doing that work. Um, Another place that we're really holding tight to is the recording of lectures and wanting QFA members to be in the loop on that and being able to say, in my class, I don't think lectures should be recorded, and we think there should be an alternate means for things like student accommodations. So we're holding tight on that. And then finally, for librarian and archivist members, that they may revise core functions. This is in Article 35, and that the scope of those functions should be defined by librarians and archivists. So those are some of the places we're really holding tight on IT. So we've really focused it down to like a handful of proposals versus having like many, many proposals throughout the agreements. Moving on to job security, and this is the one I think that where we really need the backing of a strike vote. Um, these are, I think, really important gains that we would like to make, and we really need support in order to push that through. So, for example, we've put in, we're trying to define what a teaching focused position is. Right now it's undefined. The university is hiring people um, who are coming in and doing teaching focused roles. We know that those are at 70%. They're typically in 1.5 teaching load units. The concern is if those start to go into 2.0 or 2.5 units, then the teaching loads become completely untenable. And so we're trying to cap those teaching loads at 60%, and that's like a 3.0 of teaching. So that's one that we're really holding on to. Likewise, we've made a proposal around spousal appointments and kind of having some ground rules on what that would look like, and sort of making that like a little more transparent process than what it is right now. Special appointments, we've got some questions around, again, um, being notified, when they're happening, and kind of some of the language in the agreement doesn't match in terms of external funding agency versus just external funding, that kind of thing. Appointments committees, currently in non-departmentalized faculties, those are run by the dean. We think they should be run by QFA members. And we're also looking for language around appointments committees where faculty or university-wide searches for broad committees, like, for example, for nationally funded chairs, and how those committees should be structured and run and all of that. Tightening up emergency versus or exceptional circumstances when that language can be triggered. QFA has sought to delete Q sets from the collective agreement. The universities countered that they're not interested in that, but they did counter to say that they would be open to exploring other options going forward. It is so far QFA's position, they should just be deleted. Moving on to Article 32. So there's something called SROR, which is the specific right of reappointment, GROR, which is a general right of reappointment, and then one can become a continuing adjunct. So for those adjuncts, they have to, in order to get on that first rung of the ladder of getting SROR, they have to teach a half course, like a full half course, 3 times within 5 years. And then you can start to accrue rights. What we're finding, though, is that courses are increasingly becoming a bit more fractured. They're either a larger course, but then multiple people teaching it, or they're less than a half course, or all kinds of things. So then it becomes very difficult to get on that SRO or ladder, or can be difficult. So we were seeking that portions thereof would count. We received a no on that. We did counter and say, well, if the portion thereof is equal to a half course, then it should count. And we've been sort of sticking on that point. We are looking for some clarification around the GROR language, which is just kind of confusing. We're also seeking that adjuncts have access to 30.6.11, which recognizes kind of a lower bar for like a lower threshold for research, and that's available to tenure track, but is not available to adjuncts. So we think adjuncts should have access to that. And then finally, also that continuing adjuncts who are promoted to associate, that they would have access to this teaching focused position that we have proposed, and that there would be a path to that. The university did counter on that. Um, their counter wasn't great. They wanted that would be for somebody who had a 1.0 FTE and a research program, and they wanted to delete the faint hope clause. So they have since withdrawn that proposal, but they are sticking on the 1.0. So we are at least having discussion in that area. And sorry, and just a couple other points. There's this word degree credit in the agreement, and so when the agreement was written, everything was a degree program at Queen's, or most things were degree programs at Queen's, and so it was never contemplated that that word degree credit could be problematic. And so we've been trying to seek to just have that read as credit, not degree credit. And as a final point, we've also been seeking clarification around teaching fellows and the overuse of teaching fellows, and just sort of looking to tighten up some of that language there and an understanding with the university about teaching fellows. Okay, so moving on to the next package, workload. I've already talked about that a little bit. We're sort of almost there. I think that's sort of been the shining spot so far in this round of bargaining, is that we've made a lot of progress in workload. And then moving on to fairness. Again, we've had some gains already in this area. So we've clarified release time for librarian and archivists in terms of like when they're working with QUFA. In the event of a strike or lockout for a different union on campus, that members will now advise their deans and not their department heads. We've cleaned up some JCAA language. We've cleaned up some Article 19, which is grievance language, so some procedural things. We've also made some clarifications in the equity article, which currently only kind of speaks to tenure and tenure track. It didn't speak to continuing adjuncts or librarians, which we think was just an oversight. And so we've made sure that those uh, um, members are now also covered under Article 24. And also, all members can now send recommendations to the appointments committee if they are, if like for academic administrators. So it's all members can provide feedback into the committee about, when they meet a potential candidate. Um, so there are other things too that are kind of a bit more housekeeping in nature. And finally, I'll move on to compensation and merit. Most of the discussions have revolved around the merit process so far. So some of the things that we're not fully decided on, but we're having active discussions are things like if a member doesn't meet expectations, like how is that feedback received? Also, we've asked that members should receive a half step if they don't meet expectations. We're talking a lot about the break point. So there's going to be a break point like sort of above and below where you would receive a certain amount uh, uh, if you were, above or below that break point. And so we haven't quite come to agreement on what that break point should be and what those amounts should be, but we are having active discussions. Same with percentage. There will be a percent received for promotion. We're talking about those things, how the transparent criteria will be developed, all that stuff. So that is active discussion that's going on between the parties. Where we haven't received any response is, for example, we've kind of raised again the inadequacy of the QUFA house. Haven't received a response. Release time for QUFA for QUFA the executive, so they can do the work that they do. Also, the adjunct fund, we've looked to increase the amount of the awards. That hasn't been increased in many, many years, maybe decades. So it's always been sort of $2,500 and $5,000. But as everybody knows, the cost of attending conferences, all of those things have gone up substantially. So we're looking to increase that amount. We've also sought to have a research fund for librarians. Haven't heard back on that. to increase to $3,000 or $428 for term adjuncts per course for half course to help cover the cost of cell phones and things like that. There's some changes to tuition support and childcare. I'll just highlight an example that right now you can only claim $5 a day for like camps and things like that. And we know that those costs are much higher. So looking to increase that amount, looking to delete proration of continuing adjuncts, just so that they would receive the full amount as they do for for example. And where we just heard a hard nose has been on increase to stipends for term adjuncts to improve course cancellation language for term adjuncts and a HICSA. We've also raised the notion that long-term, like the LTD coverage is very, very low for QFA members, and haven't had any traction with that. So that's kind of where we are with the proposals. And, there's still a lot of, things that are outstanding that we think are really, really important. And we're just not getting feedback in those areas where they don't really want it. Like in the places that they want to talk, we're having dialogue, but if in the other areas it's just we just hear no. And that's it. So we really need your support to be able to keep pushing through. So I'll turn it over to Aicha and let her sort of extrapolate a bit.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and thanks, folks, for coming out. So I just want to say a few words about how we ended up with this decision to ask for your support for a strike vote. We started this round of bargaining, not counting the kind of the preparations beforehand, on May 11th, and we had 37 days of active bargaining. And another 7 or 6 days scheduled for August for the next 2 weeks. We only had 2 weeks of hiatus in between, so we had been really working hard and closely on this round of bargaining. The packages that Micheline overviewed, came out of multiple consultations with our memberships. And based on member engagement, we had multiple surveys, town halls, meetings with units and faculties. And we are confident that our packages and our positions reflect the priorities of our members based on those consultations. And thus far, for instance, Michelle mentioned the workload standard and the guidelines and example and how we are close to kind of resolve that, because that was one of the packages that we were able to actively engage with the employer. Hearing their concerns, we were able to communicate our concerns or priorities, etc. And once you have a kind of an active communication, it is easier to find your middle grounds between parties and have a, fair and equitable language that that will be helpful actually for our members and for our workplace. But it is unfortunately in this round of bargaining, workload and to some extent merit have been exceptions to the regular bargaining with the employer. If they come back with a response, and even if it is a no, if they give us a meaningful response, a reason, a data backing it, we as a team, we work, pretty fast. We are hard workers. We are quite creative, coming up with solutions, and pretty fast. But thus far, the employer has been just sending walls of no's with no explanation or little explanation. And one example that I can give, from the 2 days of consultation the week before, we were expecting a job security response that we've been waiting for months, literally. And 4:30 p.m., last day of conciliation, we are called back into the room, and the response is just 2 sentences. We say no to everything except these 2 things. One of them was their concession anyways, which is getting rid of the, what we call the faint hope clause, which makes a continuing adjunct possible to become a tenured faculty once they hit full professor. They wanted to delete that. They withdrew that concession. It wasn't going to go anywhere with us anyways. And then the other one was, as Micheline mentioned, 100% FTE with research program. Continuing adjunct can convert into a teaching focus position. And that was it, right? And we had probably 40 something language proposed in that package. We waited for it to hear something for 2 days. At the end of conciliation, they come in and then say no to everything, and again, no explanation. The most common thing that we've been hearing in the last months, basically the whole summer, was we are not interested in it. That's the kind of the extent of their explanation for pretty much any no's that they've been kind of sending our way. And again, since this happened in conciliation, we as a team in consensus decided that it is time for to reach back to our members and then ask for their support, so that hopefully, a strong support behind us for our proposals that we shared with you all. And with the larger context that, the members will say, we support our bargaining team, we support this mandate, and, show a strong yes to the strike vote. So hopefully, I'm hoping that we can count on your support so that we can push through, that wall of no's with no reasons. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Aicha. Aicha's on the bargaining team, as is Francine. I don't think we have another member of the bargaining team here. Francine, did you want to add anything to what's been said so far?
I was thinking just at the very end when Micheline was speaking, she referred to a HICSA account, which is a healthcare spending account for folks who may not know the acronym. Earlier in the session, we sort of reflected on how deep we are in this bargaining process, and we might have referred to some acronyms or some terms that you may not be familiar with. So we really encourage you to ask any questions you have on your mind, and we can help clarify some of those things. But I think just in terms of the topics that we've been bargaining and how it's been going, I think Micheline and Aicha have done a really good job sort of reflecting where we're at. It's been a long slog, and having your support for a strike vote would be really, really meaningful in terms of moving forward with these important things that us members have identified in terms of our priorities. So we're not giving up. We're we're here, and we're here to answer your questions and hear what your thoughts are so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Francine. So I'm going to add a few more comments. So first of all, and some of this is for those of you who may not be familiar with strike votes or faculty associations. So a strike vote is needed now. It is not a hostile move. So a strike vote's a very natural part of the bargaining process. And in fact, the university's own labor news page at Queen's states that a strike vote is part of the process. In other words, the administration expects us to hold a strike vote. The conciliator expects us to hold a strike vote. So the ability to withhold labor is the fundamental leverage we have to get a strong collective agreement. And the ability to lock us out is the leverage that the university holds. And they don't actually need a vote to have the right to do that. So just to tell you that a strong yes, in some sense, balances that inequity in bargaining. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, does a positive outcome of the strike vote mean that we'll be on strike? So first of all, it's not the strike vote is to authorize the executive to call a strike. It doesn't mean if the vote is yes, that a strike is called. Okay. Secondly, even if we got to the point in the process where we felt that bargaining has absolutely stalled and we must call a strike to maintain any progress on the key matters that the membership have told us are key, There's still a process that prevents that from happening immediately. And one of the things is that one side or other, us or the employer, has to ask that a no board report be filed, which gives a 17-day cooling off period, often a few days more because paperwork has to be filed. So roughly 20 days. And then we would be in a position to strike, and the university would be in a position to lock us out, neither of which might happen, right? Furthermore, bargaining continues usually even in all these periods, in the period where we're in conciliation, in the period where we're voting on a strike, in the even often and usually when a strike is called, like the bargaining teams now are very motivated to come to an agreement. So you would be authorizing the executive to call a strike, but it does not mean that a strike would be automatically called in some, soon, immediately. And often, as I said, the threat of a strike is often enough to make the employer bargain more seriously. By the way, for those of you here, again, new to faculty associations, you hear us saying things like the employer instead of, let's say, Queen's administration. So the university, unlike other sectors, is in many ways very collegial. Your dean may become just a member of your department next week. The principal might have been in your department last week, and so on. But the act of bargaining is a sort of a labor act where you have our union and the employer. So when we say the employer, it's because what we are talking about right now is the terms, our working conditions and the terms of our employment. And that is what's decided in collective bargaining. I'm saying that because I know I have heard faculty members who maybe get their back up when they hear that sort of term and they think, oh my goodness, that's already hostile. It's seeing Queen's, deans as employers, and that's already not how I feel about my work or my research. I understand that. As I said, it's in a certain context. Okay, so the main and last thing I want to talk about is you might be wondering, is this situation now really bad? Is there anything worth striking over? Like, why are we holding a strike vote now? Why should we say yes now? So as you've probably deduced, there's no one big concession the university is asking us to make that is likely to rally the troops and that we will all agree is so egregious that everyone under the sun will be voting yes, okay? But taken as a collection, taking the whole process as a collection, namely all the days spent in bargaining, all the proposals we have put forth, all the no's we have heard back, that is actually worth calling a strike vote over. And it also, the recent behavior at the table, while cordial, it is starting to show disregard. So if you continue to say no to our proposals, that is saying that you don't think that what we have to propose is worth even countering on or talking about. So I want to draw your attention to a few of those things that I think show tremendous disregard and for which I think, and which I think are very big deals, and which also as an umbrella speak to our ability to have a say in the decision making that affects the academic mission, the mission that we carry out, namely teaching and research. So first of all, look at collegial governance. So take something like the fact that we have proposed that at least 50% of the people on a search committee for senior leadership, such as the provost or a dean or vice provost, ought to have 50% QUFA members. So they did not come back with a counter that said, well, not 50, but 30. So in theory, such a committee could have zero. It's not likely to have zero people, but they're not willing to put on the table what they are willing to guarantee us. Why does this matter? Well, your deans, your provost, as we know, determines something about the academic mission in great part, how this university runs, whether, your ability to do your teaching and research will be thwarted or aided. And so even something like 50%, us saying 50% should be QUFA members, that's kind of a modest number. That's 50% of the people on the committee should be professors, librarians, archivists, still leaves a whole other 50% to be students, staff, whoever they want to be on the committee. And just to let you know, like at Wilfrid Laurier, as an example, their deanship search committees for, I think, senior administrators. I might have it wrong. Deanship search committees has the number of 50%. So why should we have fewer people on these committees than other universities? Okay. So that's a big deal. It's a big deal because the people who become our administrators are going to affect our ability to do our job. Next on the list that I want to draw your attention to, adjunct rights. So I know I'm in engineering. In engineering, we do not have as many adjunct instructors as, let's say, arts and science or some other faculties. And so people in engineering who might be here might think, what's the big deal? You know, adjunct rights aren't our rights. They are for a few reasons. So term adjuncts teach at the moment. So at the moment, around, I think, 40% of our membership is adjuncts, 40%. Around 50% of the courses taught are taught by adjuncts, okay? 50% at the university, and many of them big first-year courses. So if there's a second-class group of professors, those who do not have pensions, do not have the same medical benefits, do not have the same pay, do not have job security, if they can effectively carry out the mission of the university, do you think that the university is going to want to have tenured professors or hire more tenured professors? Just okay, rhetorical question. There's also the morality of it. You know, is it fair to allow our colleagues who have PhDs, the same training as trained professors, many of who might have been for 10 years or more in precarious work at our university, teaching courses without job security. So that's for us been a big point. And I want to say, you know, when I say that we want to we want to make gains, let's say ideally on pathways to security, gains on pay and rights for, let's say, term adjuncts. It's also the case that, you know, you might not realize, but what Micheline said is happening in terms of who gets the right to reappointment. It is actually a way that rights can be eroded. So in particular, the rights of reappointment for a course depend on what percent of the course you have taught, right? So let's say you've taught the whole course, you have a certain right to reappointment. If instead I'm an administrator, I assigned 3 people to teach a course, we're each assigned 33% of the course. It's not like 3 times of that and that counts as 1. Like that's the whole point, that just a small percent of the course can mean you don't have the rights to reappointment. So that allows for a path to game the system and assign courses in such a way as to actively prevent people from having rights of reappointment of a course, which in turn prevents rights of more general rights of reappointments that allow you to build to more job security. So we are also fighting to hold on to the rights that we have fought for years for our adjunct members. And the last area that I'll draw attention to is compensation. So we've been offered 1%, 1%, and 1.25% for the 3 years of the contract for across the board increases. That is lower than what inflation will be. So we are effectively being asked to accept an erosion of our purchasing power. And I know you will all differ on, you know, many people will say, we are well paid. That is not a priority for me. That's fine. First of all, most of what we're asking are non-financial issues. Like how many people are on a search committee is not a financial issue. Okay, so we are not asking for that. But indeed, we are a union bargaining for our members' rights, and members have different circumstances. You know, some members might be supporting 5 people on their salary, and it really does make a difference to them to not be having their purchasing power eroded. And I want to tell you, if you see in one of our emails that was sent around, the offers to other universities that in the past few years have been bargaining, so for like this year and the coming 4 years, the offers are in keeping with 2% and 3%, and in some case higher across the board increases. So this offer is low, very low across the sector, just to let you know. So I just want to say we really need a strong and unwavering yes vote to ensure that all our colleagues get a fair collective agreement so that we have working conditions that allow us to actually do our work, to teach and do research, and to carry out the mission of the university. And of course, we're hoping that all of you here will vote and will vote yes. But please, we recognize it's summertime. Please spread the word to your colleagues, to your departments, to your friends, to people you know, to people you sit on committees with. Do it by email, by text, by calling, post on social media. The vote starts tomorrow, and it's really important to just spread the word of why it's so important to vote yes for a strike vote now. Thanks, everyone.
We're happy to answer any
Elizabeth,
questions.
you can stop recording, Elizabeth, and I will open the floor to questions.